Hello, everyone, and welcome to the beginning of August lineup here on the Wandering Scribe and Wandering Quill YouTube channel. I am your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe, and today we have our first author for the month of August. She is a fantasy writer who described herself as not having poetic, quirky, or mysterious descriptors for herself, but she loves writing and storytelling. She mostly writes science fiction, fantasy, and contemporary novels, all of them deeply focused on villains. Why, you may ask? Easy. They're way more fun. Her young adult science fiction novel is coming out, or did come out, June 2024, and she's been writing more stories since then. She's drafting a spooky speculative fiction that took her ages to start, and aside from that, she is forcing herself to start editing a new adult contemporary book. It's lots of fun, and as described by my guests, lots of party and booze. But if many of you follow her on social media, you know that she is most known for her iconic book, or one of her iconic books, Anti. I'm probably butchering that title, but it is a very, very fascinating story where the villains earn the right and the heroines fall a little bit short. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to a first timer here on the channel, author Alexandra Atman. Alexandra, thank you so much for coming on the channel today.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. I have to apologize in advance. I have a little bit of allergy, so if you see me doing this, is the season a little bit, it seems, even though we're in summer. And yes, my name is Alexandra Atman, and as Gabriel was saying, I'm an author of mostly young adult science fiction, fantasy, and contemporary fiction. My first book is this one, Anti. And this book was published on the 16th of July, so it's been out for almost 2 weeks. I've been lucky enough to secure distribution via Dutch bookstores. I live in the Netherlands, so that's been very nice. And as for the rest, it is, of course, available via Amazon. And yes, as you were saying, I tend to write books and stories that focus on the villains, not because I think they should be glorified, but because I like to explore a different point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And why do these people that are vilified, rightly or not, are doing something? I hate, that very classic mustache twirling villain that
Yes,
destroy the world. And I wonder, okay, if you destroy the world, where are you gonna live? Because they clearly don't want to die sometimes. So it's like, what is the logic behind this idea? I never
right.
logical. So in my books, I wanted to have villains that have a point, that are right in the context of the story, that have a plan that makes sense. And through those villains, I like to confront a little bit the beliefs of the reader.
Nice. So let's actually start in the beginning. Let's go back in time a little bit. So, Alexander, walk us through your childhood growing up. Were you always fascinated in storytelling and writing, or did that come about later? And if so, what was sort of the aha moment in the sense that you wanted to not only tell stories and share stories with others, but you wanted to be an author?
I always was a little bit talkative. I think that's the word, like that kid that talks too much and goes and talks with random people. So that really was a little bit funny, but I was a kid, so nobody took offense. But I'll be that child. So I think I always wanted to hang out with adults because I found that they were more interesting because they were more articulate and they could tell me stories where the other kids were just playing and screaming. And so in that sense, I think that from a very young age I was interested in words and in speech. Actually, one of my dreams was to memorize the dictionary. I don't know what was that, but I remember very clearly that I sat down with dictionary and I would start just like going every day through the words. I never memorized everything, but I feel like it started from a lot of words and what words meant and a lot of conversation. And then I remember that I used, like any other teen perhaps, I used to watch all the US produced series for teenagers when I was a teen. And one day when I was 13, I just woke up and said, I have to go to a city center because I want to buy a notebook and I want to write a book. But it was really like this. And I remember that I did that, and it was like kind of fan fiction of the show that I was liking then, very bad, and then nothing made sense. But my classmates actually like to read it. So the notebook will like make turns in the classroom.
Okay.
First novel, I think it's somewhere in my mom's house, but I haven't revised it because trust me, it's not good. And I did write a couple more things, but I knew that that was just like a hobby, something I like to do. And then when I went to university, I stopped writing because I think I was busy with life. And then when I settled a little bit in life, when I was like I had more time to reflect and enjoy, I started to write again. And my first story was this one, was the story that became Auntie.
Mm.
And I work on this story. If I remember correctly, I started in 2017 and I
Ooh,
finished
okay.
the pandemic. It took me a while because I was not writing seriously. I was not thinking about publication. And then what happened is that I started a Twitter account, and on Twitter, I started to see the tweets of people that were curing agents and doing all that and working towards publication. So I guess that drew me into seeking the same thing. But that's another story how that went, because in the end I decided to self-publish, and but I guess via Twitter I started to take it more seriously. I found CPs, beta readers, friends, and yeah, I got more serious about it. And during the pandemic it was very difficult for me to do anything, I think for everyone. I
Yeah.
was very sad. I was like a feeling of fear, and it was not a great mood to write or edit anything. So there's a gap between the moment when I finished a novel and I started editing and the moment when I was ready with it, around the end of the pandemic. And then yeah, I don't know if I should go through the whole story. Should I also talk a little bit about my experience with agents, because I think I'm covering everything. But the point is that I decided late last year to self-publish the book, because of a few reasons, and that's my journey with writing in a nutshell, I would say.
All right, all right. And the oh, you're fine. You're fine, Alexander. And actually, I'm actually glad you actually saved the agents part, because we will be talking about the business side of being an author. And there is a question that I think would tie directly to what you were going to say about, your journey with agents and experiences and stuff like that. So we will save that for the later
Okay.
part of the interview. So for fans or for readers who have not heard of this book, or I should say specifically for viewers who are watching for the first time, Alexandra, what can you tell us about your book, Auntie? What is like the overall story?
Here it is. I think Anti-Well is a young adult science fiction book. However, I must say that it has crossover appeal, and most of the readers it had before, of course, were adults like me, and they really loved the story and connected with it, even though they were not teenagers. So some people have told me it's upper young adult,
Okay.
uh, and it's not. It doesn't read too young. I don't know if I'm explaining myself through that word, but it means that it is a little bit almost an adult novel, but in a young with a young adult vibe. And the main character, Georgina, we call it G too, call her G. She is an aspiring space pilot who also happens to be quite good at building small, very small things. And the center of the story is that she's trying to become a space court, a space pilot, because she wants to leave Earth. In
Right.
her world, it's kind of maybe near future, although I don't think it's that near, hopefully. But let's say it's a near future scenario in a fictional country called Negara, where robots are taking over all the jobs, like fight
Ooh, okay.
being replaced. Robots can build your houses, can replace teachers, have taken all the service jobs. Like basically the job market is taken by the robots, and everybody else is just at home surviving off a universal income that is actually very generous in this
Hmm.
specific. country, and Negar is the only country where this is happening. So they have isolated themselves, and that's part of the tension because other countries want the technology, but they refuse to share it because, of course, as you can imagine, it's a society, it's kind of a geniocracy in which the government is composed by the smartest. So they think that the rest of the world will do bad things with the technology they have, so they are kind of isolated themselves
Okay.
and have secrecy. So there's a lot of tension also with the international community in that sense, and the rest of the countries of our normal world exist. And this one is fictional. And in this country, again, since the robots have taken all the jobs, the few jobs that are left are for robotics engineers, people that are doing very specific things. And if you don't qualify for a job, it's seen as a shame. And she's desperate to qualify, to pass the exams after school, to qualify. Also, because if she doesn't pass the exams, she also cannot join the Space Academy. So it's also this world that is very beautiful. Everybody has resources. Nobody's living in poverty in this country, but it's also a little bit hopeless because if you don't have an artistic passion, for instance, what do you do with your time if you are just at home and cannot get a job? So if you don't have a hobby, you get bored, and a lot of people are starting to turn violent. So it's kind of an utopia that becomes a dystopia because in
Mm.
we need, I think we need purpose as human beings, and I think that sometimes for some of us work gives us purpose. And of course it's not for everyone, but it's like the general premise of what's happening in society. And the other two main characters of the novel are Georgina's mother, whom is a very bright and renowned scientist, and Ceriel, which is the nemesis who will become, of course, love interest. And
All
there's
right.
tension between the mother of Georgina because one of them created an artificial intelligence that the other stole, and he wants to release it so that the robots can have more power. And in the book, we are discovering the reasons why he did that. You could say that all these characters, these are the three main characters, but there's a lot of others, they are all villainous in their own way. You won't find a single character that is completely good or noble, but everybody's out for themselves and kind of
Mm.
agenda. And it's a story about betrayals, and even Georgina's closest friends turn out to betray her and be using her, so she's basically everybody's pawn. And yeah, without giving too much, is that is I call it the story about the robocalypse. I think that's the way of saying it. And we have to see what this girl does and whether she saves us from it or triggers it, actually.
Ooh,
It's a lot.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Nice. So let's actually talk about writing the book now. Like you're now in the process in your life of writing this book, drafting it up. When you were typing the story up and drafting the story from the first draft, what was sort of your initial goals going forward with the story, as well as the need you want to satisfy for fans in the genre, as well as fans who enjoyed this type of story?
You know, the thing is, I write for myself. I am not the type of writer that I have friends that sit down and make lists of cool concepts or very marketable concepts, and then
Mm-hmm.
they use and mix and match and only write books about that, which is fine because then you, of course, have more chances of having commercial success. But for me, I'm a pantser, first of all. So I never have an outline. I don't even have notes. Like if you ask me if I have notes, from Auntie, or you know those spreadsheets when people put like the color of the eyes of this person
Right.
and their zodiac sign and all that stuff. I have nothing. Like all the notes are here. I have not a single note from this book. It's all in my mind and now in the book. And I'm that kind of writer that just starts doing something and goes. So for me, there was no goal regarding readers, and there was no goal regarding market as well. I did it for myself. And I think for me, as we will discuss later, of course, that was also part of the journey to self publishing. I guess it's a messy way of writing. I find it very free,
Mm.
and what works for me, I can outline very well, and I've done full very detailed outlines that I really like, but I never can write them because the second I know what's gonna happen, I lose interest and simply cannot write it. So
Ah, okay.
yeah, so I would say there's no plan or interest or thinking about the reader at any point. It's just about whatever comes to mind for me. And I wrote this book in my during my commute to work on the train. So it is a book that was born out of the necessity of filling up my time and just doing
Wow.
something, and also escape, of course, like just have something that made me feel like my life was worthwhile, because the words that I wrote that day were forever. So
Hmm.
made me feel good, and it gave me an escape. So those will be the reasons why I wrote and the mindset from which I wrote the book.
All right, all right. I respect that. I can respect that. And what you said before, it's actually a term that another one of my guests actually mentioned about either being planners, and I think you said plotters. I think those are the two terms I keep
Yeah,
hearing that some people are writers who are like, they plan everything out, they have notes, they have outlines, and then you
yeah,
have other writers who are just the ideas in their head and they just write down what's in their head. And if
exactly.
the story just changes with an idea, then that's what it happens. It just goes with the flow. And honestly, that I think is really, really nice. I love meeting writers who have different strategies of how they bring about this story. Either it's through, the planning and the ideas that are still in their head, or it's notes or references or guides to help to get the story along. So now let's move forward a bit in the book's history. So after you finish with the draft, you got it edited, you got cover artists, you got exactly where you want to be, and you published it on the digital stage. What was the initial reaction like? Were they positive? Were they mixed? And is there one review that stands out to you?
You mean before, when I was trying to curate to agents? Right
Um,
now that is published.
I more so of like when the book was published, when you
Oh,
self-published it, to be
okay.
specific. Sorry.
No, no problem. Um, I self-published it, and I think what I did is that I sent some copies to people I already knew from Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Early my friends, because first of all, many of my friends left Twitter and actually made a stop to writing a post to writing, not a stop. So some of them are not really active, at least for this month. So I sent it to other people that I knew a little bit in passing, that we sometimes interacted, and then I knew that they at some point asked me about the book, and or they liked the tweets when I was talking about it. So I
Mm-hmm.
asked a few of them if they would be interested in reading an arc, and many of them say yes. So that was the first thing, and then I opened a I opened a TikTok account, and I met some readers there, and then I also started sending art. So let's say those are the first people that have read the published book. And I remember that there were some reviewers that were really funny, like, "Oh, this book gave me things that I didn't know I needed." And things like that. And some people were very into the love story, because there is a love story. I call it a kind of, it's very toxic in a way, because
Okay.
this book is not a romance, although there's romance, but it's not about the romance. The romance is an important element, and I think catalyst is, that you can say, of the plot, but
Okay.
not in a romantic way. It's not a romantic book, even though there are a lot of cute moments, and and they, some of them really like that, like we really like the romance, and then really like the male character, and some others were more focused on liking the plot. But in general, the reviews have been very positive, and most people have noted that the book is refreshing because it's a little bit different from what they are reading from mainstream publishers. And I find that very interesting, because it's part of my story. When I was dealing with agents and speaking with them about the book, the uniqueness of the book was seen as, and I found that very illuminating for me in terms of helping me decide what I wanted to do and what I wanted to go with the book. So I think that has stuck with me a lot. Being told that it was unique in a positive way, when I was being told by agents and industry professionals that the uniqueness of the story was a problem.
All right. And we're actually now going to touch into that. So we're actually going to start with the first part of this question, which little context for this one. Now, Alexander, you can definitely agree that, being an author, especially either, independent or traditional, it's a lonely feeling. It's a lonely process because it's hours and hours, if not years, crafting a story from just the first draft. And then from the first draft, you have to find an editor, find a cover artist, and if you go the independent route, marketing your book so that way it gets the readership. Or if you go the traditional route, it's sending out letters, sending out queries, and that anxiety is just like building up in all of us as authors. And then no matter which direction we go, once the book is published, there's again that anxiety feeling of if it's going to hit the readers or it's going to attract the readers that are interested in the story. And that voice of imposter syndrome, you know, comes and is very, very present and aware. So for you, Alexandra, have you ever had those moments of imposter syndrome when you were crafting the story and even afterwards trying to send this story out to, you know, agents to hopefully get it picked up? And if not, what has continued to discipline you to tell this story? Because in your own words, as you said, this story is fresh, it's unique, and it's a story that's worth being told.
I think for me, I think it's a matter of personality, of course, what you do as an author. For me, I first thought that I needed an agent to publish my books and all that. I thought and I wanted it because I wanted the support and working with a team. When I started QAing Auntie, I received a lot of positive feedback from agents that told me, "Oh, I like your writing. Oh, I like the premise. It's very original. It's very unique. The problem is I don't know who to sell this to." And I
Mm,
think that many authors or writers still operate from the mindset that this is about art for them. It's not. Of course, they want to find a good book they fall in love with, but if they find a commercial book, they will take it anyway. And it's logical because it's a business for them and they need to make money, so no problem.
right.
It's what it is. But the thing is, if I realized after being sad for of hearing that they didn't know who to sell it to, I realized that I never wrote for that reason, and that I was letting the marketability of my book hit my sense of worth as a writer and as a
Mm,
creator. And I decided that I needed to step back from that because it was killing my love of writing. I was focusing so much in finding an agent and having a book deal that I was not able to write anything because I was blocked and thinking that everything I was doing was impossible to sell. And you just feel sad. And a lot of my friends started finding agents and signing book deals. So it is quite a lot to process, and I feel like that's one thing you have to learn how to process those feelings and find your own place and also decide what kind of writer you want to be. I really think it's a choice that you make consciously. And for me, because I noticed how much it affected me. I noticed that for me, it had to remain fun. So I quickly started realizing that perhaps traditional publishing will taint the experience for me because there's so much pressure
mm,
to perform, to have pre-orders, to do social media, to do, and to hit the list. I have friends that are now publishing books after the summer, so they are gearing up towards publication, and they are having constant stress moments and doubts and stuff like that because they know that there's an expectation, and if the book doesn't do well, it's going to be harder for them to sell another one, etc., etc., etc. And you also get kind of a track record as a person that doesn't sell. So it's the industry is quite complicated, and I noticed that I'm not cut for that. That I really am in this for the fun. So that helped me, first of all, place the value of my story in the readers, the opinion of the readers, and my
mm-hmm.
enjoyment of writing, and to decide that I perhaps was better off self-publishing it so I could keep it the way it is with all my villains and my twists and turns. And because that's the kind of writer I want to be, I don't want to compromise my process and my ideas because I have to enjoy it, you know. And if I do
Right.
that, the kind of person that is not gonna enjoy making lists and deciding what's good to read, depending on what's selling and what people would like. So I think that's the main thing for me. I don't know if I deviated from the question. You let me know. But yeah.
I actually think you kind of combined the next question into
Oh,
this, which I actually like, which is, you know, the path of, you know, traditional versus indie, but you did kind of answer it
Yeah. Okay.
That, as well as going back to the second part of the question, what is, like, your discipline, what's continued to discipline you to tell a story, and you did answer it, where for you felt as a creative person that you did not want to lose your muse, so to speak, that if you went the traditional publishing, been more like a business schedule to keep, up to date with like what the company wants, and that would have killed your passion for writing. And as you said, you want your passion to, be free. You want to have the control of, I'm going to release this book, then I'm going to write this story the way I want it to. I want to market the book the way it's supposed to be marketed, because I've met a lot of authors on this show who have told me that when they have gone the traditional publishing route, either big or small, some of their books were mismarketed. More recently, I had a guest, Raven Velasco, wrote a vampire story, and it was marketed as a romance. There's romance elements in it, but it's not a romance story. And the review she got from the romance community was really, really bad. And she even
Yeah.
said on the show that it kind of put her in a sense that she's not going to write romance, at all. Like, she's going to have romantic elements, but she has no plans of writing a true romance story. And from what you've said about, the industry, it is exactly correct. And to just take a little break here, viewers and listeners, we're not saying you can't go either or. It's up to the individual preference. But just so you know, if you go traditional publishing, you have to understand it is a business for these houses.
Right.
And you also have to do your research into what house you believe your book would market in. And also, very, very important, make sure you tell your either your agent or the representative of the house what kind of book it is. You do not want your book to be mismarketed, mislabeled, because it's not going to sell well. And for independent publishing, that mindset's very much the same. Who exactly are you marketing this towards? Who exactly are your readers? So now let's actually talk about that aspect of the writing process. So, Alexandra, would you say that when you began writing this book, and from the feedback you got from your friends, the fellow readers, now that it's been out for a while now, do you have a good idea of your audience, in a sense, the genre that this story belongs to? And also, in your opinion, how important is it for an author to really understand their audience? Because, as you said before, the first target audience of our stories is, of course, ourselves. We know the story better than anyone else. But when sharing it with others, we really have to understand who the audience is.
Yeah. I think that again, there's the people that plan everything with the aim, and there's the others that are like wherever I go. And
Right.
for me, I think what I've noticed, first of all, my first book is sci-fi. Sci-fi is a genre that historically is more read by men, and there's this thing that many of us call bro sci-fi, and this is a very bad comment, but bro sci-fi is that sci-fi that is all about the laser battles and the spaceship and the fun, and we are up there and fighting and the aliens and all the goodies, but it's not necessarily too character oriented. The characters are means for the plot, and they can be very interesting, very unique, but we're here for the plot in those books for the most part. And perhaps it's a misconception, but it's the idea that many young adult readers have of science fiction. That is broad sci-fi, all battles, and very little heart. And it's very
Okay.
very negative idea, but I learned this through my contact with agents, and that's how they see it, and that's why young adult science fiction is a little bit of a hard sell. I wouldn't say it has as much of a hard sell as when I was curating it, but it's still not fantasy, or even less, it's not romantasy. That if you have a romantasy right now, you're probably gonna get everything
Oh,
bad
yes. Yes.
done for you. But science fiction, then there's a stigma, especially when you don't write adult science fiction, because with adult science fiction, I think it's easier. The readers are different, they're used to certain things, but when it's young adult, I think young adult science fiction writers were still carving our space. And for me, one thing that I noticed is that most of the readers there are reading fantasy and now romantasy, and for me it was a little bit of a work of convincing them you will enjoy this book because it's soft science. Even though there's a lot of robots, it's not heavy on the science explanations, even though I explain everything and you're not going to feel like the tech elements are underdeveloped. But the thing is that it is character, it's a lot of plot, but it's character driven. So even
Mm,
if readers enjoy it because they can connect with the characters and spend time with the characters, in their minds and in their hearts, in their feelings, which I think is very important for younger readers. And of course, giving them the fun tech, but not making it this kind of science fiction that they find that doesn't give too much heart to things. And I know this is very controversial, but I'm just explaining what I was told by agents. And what I've learned after that is that my main public are women. The few readers that I read it that are male find, if they are hard sci-fi fans, they find it soft science fiction, and I tell them that like I don't here I'm not writing Dune. This is not
right.
about empires and things like that. It's not that. That's awesome. That's not what I do. Mine is a little bit different, a little bit lighter, and lighter in the treatment and not in the subject. But you know what I mean. It's not
Right.
about, and it's not like high fantasy, not high sci-fi. Let's call it that way. And so basically, most of my readers are women. The few men that read it, they like it, but they always said, okay, soft sci-fi. And I say, absolutely, don't expect the battles and all that stuff. And when the young adult readers understand that, it actually becomes an advantage because, again, they don't tend to love the hard sci fi stuff. Not all of them. There's always people that like that, but the majority of the readers in the young adult sphere, for what I know and have experienced, is not their cup of tea. And especially now with the wave of romantasy, I'm sure you know everything is romantasy right now.
Yes.
If you don't have romance, especially in young adult, the truth is that is a little bit difficult because many readers have come to expect romance elements, and with the rise of romantasy, it's just everything in the market, and it's kind of difficult to market anything else. So you have to, if you're not writing romantasy, you probably want to focus a lot on marketing the romance aspect of your book. Otherwise, since readers are so used to it right now, they are not interested. And I'm talking, of course, about young adult readers in a very general way. There's many people that read different things, but again, I'm generalizing for us to
Right.
have of the mainstream situation. So yeah, I know, for instance, when I send arcs, I send mostly to women because I know the story will resonate with them better. Also, the main character is a girl. And the guys also like it. The guys like it, but when they are hard sci-fi readers, they note it's so sci-fi. I said, okay. And I think that my next book is a fantasy book, not romantasy, fantasy, and I think it will be easier
All
because in
right.
my view, fantasy is just an easier sell. Although at the same time, it's so crowded that perhaps that's not true, and it's harder to stand out.
Definitely, definitely. You really hit the nail like on the head that, finding your audience, is not it's not easy. And some authors even say that when you're writing your book, like it's the audience that's like the first thing like you have to think of before you even begin writing, because like who exactly is this book really going to target? Like if you're writing for a fantasy audience, well, okay, what subgenre of fantasy are you trying to target? The
Yeah,
high fantasy, epic fantasy, romance fantasy, which is dominating the publishing world because everything
yeah.
has romance fantasy. It's crazy. It's ridiculous.
It's
And we'll actually touch on that
I
a
have a
little bit
story,
later.
I have a story about that. A very juicy story about what is happening at the bookstore level, and especially when romantasy that is heavy on the smooth has been marketed as young adult.
Oh, you actually touched on something that we're actually going to get
Yeah,
into. So we're going to save that just for the next
yeah,
question. So the next business question, which I want to hear your thoughts on, Alexandra, is of course, um, for all of us authors, we're always inspired by readers of the, or say, writers of the past, like George R. Martin, J.K. Rowling, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Frank Herbert's Dune, and so many other stories. It's incredible. And sometimes we rub off on these authors in terms of, how we approach characters, how we approach storytelling, world building, and stuff like that. But one add-on that a guest of mine said in the previous month really had me thinking. Shout out to Eric Bowden for this, which is, I'm sure you definitely agree, Alexandra, that you have seen books that have had the tagline, the next J.K. Rowling, the next Stephen King, and stuff like that. Now, as readers who see that, we get the preconceived notion of what to expect. Even if we've never read from that author, we have this preconceived notion just upon reading that tagline what to expect. But from an author's perspective, it's not really the best thing because, again, readers are going to assume when they open our books, we're going to either write a story in the same style as the person we're being compared to, our characters are going to be compared to the characters of that author, and so forth. But for us authors, we want to find our originality. We want to take elements from the titans of the past, but make our own voice as an author. Ultimately, what he was saying was when you pick up a book by Eric Bowden, that was the guest name, you get an idea of what to expect from him. And when he gets another book out, okay, you now know what to expect in the second book. So let's actually talk about of that, Alexander. So firstly, who were the authors that really helped you hone your voice as the author you are now? And what is your thoughts on this comparison in the publishing world and how, in your opinion, it's not really good for independent authors who want to, present their own voice in the publishing world?
I have several thoughts on this, so keep me on track if I go everywhere. Um,
Okay.
the first thing is that sorry, is that I'm a science fiction reader. And maybe it will sound very funny, but I'm not someone. I haven't read Dune, for instance, which I know is terrible, and I have it. I have to say it. I'm not a big fiction reader. When I was a child, I read only classics, and I read
Okay.
that far too much for my age. Like I was reading Dostoevsky when I was like 12. That's absolutely not the age to read Russian classics. But that was what I was reading. I think the only young adult book that I read when I was young was like Little Women and something else, like two or three books. That's it. Everything else I consumed was very heavy classics, and I also was not overly exposed to Anglo literature. I'm Colombian, so I was exposed to only Latin American and Russian and some English classics, but
All
not
right.
for many American classics, or some other Europeans. Well, a lot of French as well. But my education as a reader was a little bit different. I was
Mm.
not a reader. I was not a science fiction reader. I was just reading classics, literary fiction, and contemporary fiction. However, I was a huge devourer of sci-fi on TV, and
Oh, okay.
that was my real school. I don't come from the school of the books. I come from the school of the shows and the movies, which I guess
Okay.
orthodox way of doing it, but that's just how I did it. And I wrote Auntie, this book, not because I wanted to write sci-fi, but because I had an idea for the ending of it, and I built the whole story backwards. And I just wanted to talk about that subject, and that's why the book is enjoyed by people that don't usually read sci-fi, because it's a sci-fi book that is not hard sci-fi, and therefore it is accessible for readers that are not used to hard sci-fi, or that find it a little bit too technical, because that's sometimes the thing for some of them.
Mm.
And and, and and that's it. So basically I don't have a lot of reference in terms of sci-fi, because I didn't read too much sci-fi. And I
Okay.
think, depending on the reader, it is a strength of my book.
Mm.
uh, I'm not a sci-fi reader, and I think I'm not saying the sci-fi books are not good. I'm saying that I just write them differently, in a way
Right.
that connects more with fantasy readers, for instance. And I think that has been interesting for me. Regarding the boys, I think that since I was reading such different cultural perspectives. You can imagine that a Latin American writer and a Russian writer are thinking and living very different realities, especially because I was reading texts from the 60s, 70s, 80s,
Right.
90s. So basically, it's very different points of view and experiences. So I would say that it's quite eclectic, the way those lectures impact me, or those reads impact me. And I didn't have a reference in terms of voice, because I was reading so many things that were not connected, that I, fortunately, I would say, I don't have a writer that I try to emulate or that inspires me to write. No, I would say that in that sense, I'm kind of very free, and I like it. I like it. I read a lot, but I noticed that whatever I'm doing, I'm never thinking, oh, but what would this and that do? Or the book,
Oh, okay.
I'm just doing my thing. In my books, my writing style is very conversational. It's a little bit like the main character or the narrator is your friend and he's telling you a story. So it's very accessible, and that also has worked for me and has been well received by my readers so far. And I hope it will continue to be well received. So that's the second point. And in terms of the industry, when I was talking with agents, of course they want the next best thing to be like the latest good thing, so they kind of want you to recycle certain aspects, not necessarily a voice or a style, but the themes and the elements of the story for marketing. And again, that doesn't work well for me because I'm a pantser, so I cannot consciously control what I'm gonna do before I just start doing it. And I think that makes me a little bit of a messy drafter. It takes a lot of time to edit my books because it's a little
Mhm.
bit all over the place. But so far, incredibly, it works for the readers. And that's it. So, in terms of reference, I have no idea. I would only tell you I'm very conversational in my style. So, it's just like having a conversation with a friend that is telling you a story that sounds a little bit like gossip.
All right, nice. So you are truly the definition of like the independent, like true, like to the true sense of the word. Like you are your own author, you your own style, your own voice, and you really, really try to make it your own. And that's truly, if there was a marking point for you, Alexander, it's truly that. Like your voice and your originality is your selling point to
Hopefully.
readers and to other authors, that you've honed your craft to be your own independent person, which I find very, very fascinating. Which actually, this now perfectly ties into the second part of this question, which is in the industry. I'm sure you probably may have touched on this before, but from probably your contact with agents from different houses, where you said that they want to add elements from the past into your stories to make it more marketable. And I imagine they would try to say, oh, this could be the next so and so, or this book could be the next such and such. Like, to give an example, one author who no longer is with us, he's an author who I found a few years ago, Victor Milan. His trilogy, Dinosaur Nights, which was supposed to be a 4-book series, but upon his passing, the third book was out and it never got finished. His book is described as the love child of Jurassic Park and Game of Thrones. When I
Wow.
read that series, I honestly believed it, even though I've never read either of those two books, because the media that's represented those two stories exists. I had an idea. And as a reader, I was fascinated by it. But I know that some authors may not feel comfortable with that comparison, that they want to be, their own. So for you, Alexandra, how did you sort of come into your own skin in the industry? When I imagine so many agents have told you that in your discussions that you have to change this your story, your writing style has to be more like this. So can you walk us through that in sense of how you truly came into your own and felt comfortable in your own skin as an author?
I think that again is a personality thing. Everything you I think that as an author, some people are a little bit bolder in how they write, but in the end the decisions come from who you are as a person. So maybe it's your secret world, or you are a person that is very public in your secret world and you are kind of an open book. I'm a little bit of an open book. Like what you see is what you get. I'm an extrovert that has become an ambivert, but I'm mostly extroverted and very talkative, and I can talk to a wall. So for me, having a sense of who I wanted to be as a writer was very easy, because my reaction to being told what to do was not, oh, I have to comply so that this agent likes me. It was like, no, that doesn't make sense to me. And this is my hobby. If I make it a business, if I make it source of stress, if I put chains on it, I'm not gonna be able to even do it, because I'm kind of rebellious as well.
Mm,
So I have awareness of those aspects of my personality, and that helped me immediately realize that the traditional industry was not the best place for me. One of the main things, I got two main comments of agents, especially, sorry, of agencies that deal a lot with sci-fi. They wanted me to ramp up the sci-fi. They really wanted me, okay, no, we have to spend more time in space because we got to space in Anti, and we have to bring in aliens and things like this and that, and blah blah blah, and there has to all the, let's say, typical aspects of sci-fi. And I say typical within brackets because it's a generalization, but I think you know what I mean. And
right.
and I didn't want to do that because, as I mentioned before, I'm not a hard sci-fi writer. I'm not even
Right.
a hard sci-fi reader. So I was like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, how do I even write a battle? Like, they were shooting. That's it. No, it's like it's not my element. I would love to actually, and I'm starting to read more of that so I can incorporate it in book two. But it's not what naturally came to me when I was writing book one, and it was intimidating. Like, yeah, but I cannot do that because that's not me, and I have no idea how to do it, by the way. And the others wanted me to just do a romance book, and most
Mm,
importantly, the main issue that agents have with my books was that everyone is a villain. Absolutely everyone in the book is a villain. Some villains are obvious, and some you start to discover as the story goes, but there's not a single character. There's a 5-year-old kid, that's the only one, that is truly a nice, peaceful, cute person. So they were telling me, oh, but we need the best friend to redeem himself. We need an uplifting ending because it's too much. It's too much going on, and everybody is very morally gray. They always market books like everybody's morally gray, but they're not. Like, they're morally gray, and they say, oh, he makes jewelry of his victims. That's really cool. But in the end, he's in love with her, and he's kind of a secret cinnamon roll. I don't write that. Like, if my guys are bad, they are bad. And
right.
they say things that are very shocking. And the dialogue, they are gonna say things that some readers don't want to read, perhaps, or that are very confrontational. And agents found that that was perhaps a little bit too much for young adult. And I said, you know what? There's a lot of people writing different things, and if I start to copy what other people are writing, we go back to the point where I'm not myself, and I'm not doing this for fun because I'm just copying and doing what you tell me to do. And that's absolutely not what I'm doing. I do other things in my life. So this is something that I absolutely love. I hope one day I can do it full time. But for me, it's still in the point where it's my fun place, and I'm not gonna uh, vandalize it. I'm very extreme about that by making it someone else's playground. And in that, I am very open to feedback when it comes to plot holes, inconsistencies, or things that I
Right.
can improve, but not when it comes to watering down things, especially watering down my characters. In my I have other two books that are completed, and it's always the case that my cast is just villains. And I simply refuse to change it because I don't write villains for the sake of writing villains. I write villains to explore different points of view. And if I'm not doing that, if I'm not exploring that, I have no fun with the book. So I guess that's my answer. And that's why, for me, listening to that advice was not constructive. I listened to all the advice regarding how to make the prose better, how to work with grammar, how to make the story more consistent, etc., etc. That I want to hear. But the second you tell me that my character needs to be nice and do the opposite of what they did so that the reader finds it more satisfying, I said, but sometimes the readers also want to be shocked. I feel like when you make it too easy, you kind of underestimate the reader. And I
Right.
actually overestimate the reader. I really think that everybody's incredibly smart, and I'm so afraid that I want to make it as perfect as possible so that they don't read it and be like, oh, you're so dumb, you know. So again, I operate, I would say, from the opposite, but at the same time, I don't sit down and say that I want to do that, or it's just that I think it all comes from doing whatever I want, and I think you can only do that if it's part of your personality, and if you don't put commercial expectations on your work. If you are not concerned with commercial success, then perhaps you're more okay with doing whatever you want. If you perhaps want more commercial success, of course, it's for me it's a different set and different rules. And I think both are okay as long as they're true to you as a person and as a writer.
Definitely. And also to add on to that, for people say, oh, a story with villains can't work. I'll give you a counter. The entire John Wick series, there's
Oh,
not a good character in that entire series. Yes, John is the protagonist of the story. He's not a good guy. It's already stated in the first movie. He's a hitman, he's an
yeah,
assassin. The
exactly.
only reason people like him is that he's an assassin, but he has a code of honor.
And the
That
dog,
is what makes him likable.
and the dog,
Yes, and
and the
and the
first
dog too. And in fact, through all four movies, he only goes after the high table. He doesn't go after random people. In fact, even the other characters in that world have a code of honor. They even respect him because he earned his place. Yes, he is an assassin you do not want to mess with. But if you're his friend and he values your friendship, he will come to you. I mean, Winston, that character's been with John since the very first movie. And Kane, who was in the fourth movie, he was the antagonist, but he was kind of almost like an anti John Wick.
yeah,
He was only brought to kill him because his family was in danger. They're all villains,
yeah,
nonetheless, but it's their levels of villainy which is very, very interesting. Which then goes into the next business question, but I'm going to combine these two together, Alexandra. So just brace yourself. This is a very big one. So we've talked about the audience. We talked about, people who have inspired us or how we came to our own as authors. But now it's time to talk about the big thing, which is legacy as authors. And I think ultimately for us authors, we want to be one of two things. We have to be an author and to be known as an author. And for me, in my opinion, to be an author is an individual who is dedicated to the craft of storytelling and not solely motivated by money. To be known as an author is an individual dedicated to marketing, getting your book across, selling it on every platform, and really honing in on this is my book. This is the book that's going to be the start of my legacy. But if you go down that path with unrealistic goals, you run into the issue of, okay, if I want this book to really be the start of my legacy, because there are some examples of authors' debut book launching them to award winning status. You have examples of individuals putting in elements of stories that are not really necessary. They're only there to fill the market or to join the gravy train. Or you have books that are marketed to a specific audience on paper, but when you read it, they're more so either, if it's romance fantasy, more on the spice end, or even it's not spice, more of the new adult or adult genre. So you kind of run into that issue. And yes, as I said before, sometimes authors' first book launches them into award-winning status. But on the other side, you have authors who rise, fall, and repeat and repeat. So Alexandra, in your opinion, how important is it for first-time authors to really understand that for the debut novel, there is no guarantee that this book is going to be the start of their legacy, and then going to readership, in that same mentality, how important is it for an author's book to really understand its readership? Because, people read of all ages, the same book. But if you're marketing towards a specific readership, how important is it to really fine tune your story so that way it fits? And for your book in particular, would you say it's in the middle, in the sense where young adult readers can enjoy it, but also new adult and adult readers can enjoy it?
I think that I think is my book, Auntie, showing it all the time. I think again, one thing, it's sci-fi, but it's soft sci-fi. So for people that for one reason or another are a little bit intimidated by sci-fi that is very technical and massive and a lot of books and long
Right.
series, they can access it very, very easily. And since I'm writing young adult, and young adult science fiction is still a hard sell, unless you're famous, of course, and unless you're Brandon Sanderson. But if you're Brandon Sanderson, you have no problems. So
Right.
it's different. You're different than everyone else. But then for me, the fact that it's soft sci-fi is actually a good thing, because then it makes it accessible to readers that would otherwise be intimidated by hard sci-fi, and is good enough as soft sci-fi not to be hated but by hard sci-fi readers. But usually, for instance, for art readers, I told them, like, if I knew they are hard sci-fi readers, hey, this is soft, this is really, don't expect that, this is more character driven, so that they don't go in with the expectation of something and then they are negative about the book because they got something else. But you were telling about your friend that got mismarketed and all this. So
Right.
that for me, being very clear. And for me, to be honest, I find that I am so just going with the flow of whatever happens that I haven't thought of legacy. I haven't thought of anything except putting out a good book, and a book that I enjoy writing and reading. For instance, I keep two copies of Auntie next to me, and when I work from home, I work here. And sometimes in the middle of the day, I suddenly just open a page and I find myself reading a full chapter because I like this book myself. And I that for me is a good indicator that it was good and it should be out. But I don't have expectations in terms of, oh, I want to be famous, or, oh, I want to sell millions of copies. Of course, I would love to sell a million of copies, but not because of me, but because I would like people to read this story, because I really like it
Right.
and I find that it's good. So I'm that kind of writer that is in for the story and the love of the story, and I don't mind so much about myself. Like, I don't care about my brand and my name and all that. That for me is really not important. What I care about is this. And what I tell people is, look at this. This really is what matters to me. And my legacy, whether for some funny twist I become known or not, it really is not of my concern, because I'm very focused on the stories, and that's really my obsession, like the writing and the creation. And yeah, so for me, um, Auntie, I know, has appeal for both adults and new adult and young adult readers, and all my books are like that. Although the latest works that I'm working on are more adult, and I think in the end, perhaps it comes from within. Perhaps you write what you are, and
Right.
only really plan too much. For people like me, I just write what comes to me, and we'll see who finds it and how it does. I perhaps this is not the most concrete answer, but I'm really not the kind of person that is planning for sales too much. Actually, I want to learn more about that as I
Hmm.
publish the second book. So I don't have big expectations, or I don't get stressed by this or that. For me, this book is in bookstores in my country, and that's awesome. And I'm so humble and happy about that. And I just hope that people see it and, oh, this looks good, I'm gonna read it, and that's enough for me. So I guess it's that. And I guess that in a sense, I left my homeland when I was still very young. And I feel like sometimes when you leave your homeland young, you kind of, a part of you gets stuck in that time.
Hmm.
And and you don't fully mature the way other people that remain in the country or only live in one country do. So there's a lot of me that's still very young in my personality, and sometimes I can myself be a little bit like a little bit juvenile as well. So I think it comes naturally also for me to be between a young adult and an adult in
All
certain
right.
aspects of my life and of my personality. And I feel that perhaps that fits the books and that helps them also have that appeal. But I'm theorizing and I don't know how it works. I really feel like it is very closely tied to the person in a sense. Even if what we're talking about, what our characters say, do not represent us, there's something about the personality of your work. Perhaps you also feel that about your work, but I
Mm-hmm.
feel, and every time I've met a writer and when I critique their work or they send me a manuscript, I always notice the person in the writing. Not directly, but there's a flavor of the person always there. So I guess it's that. And yeah, but I don't have a plan or many expectations. It's only about the book. I want the book to be good and I want the readers to find it and to like it and to think that it is of good quality.
Nice. And we're now reaching the end of this interview, Alexandra. So there's two last questions. So the second to last question I want to ask you is, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this, is that especially for independent authors, you know, being on our own, trying to build our own brand is not really easy. But in the independent community, one of the best things about it is networking and meeting other authors and learning from them. So let's actually focus on that. So for you, Alexandra, when you went the route of self-publishing and you published your book, do you want to give any shout outs to other authors who have helped you on your journey?
Yes, there's specifically one independent author that helped me a lot. His name is Fraser Armitage. I don't know if you know him. He
I
writes.
don't think so.
He's the sweetest person ever, and his wife also helped me. They both helped me a lot with the formatting and also with a lot of, cheering me up and that I could do this. So I think he's the main person. And one of my other friends is not an indie. She's gonna publish with a publisher house. It's Adi Dena, very good friend of mine that has supported me a lot as well. And the rest of the people really are from my personal life, like offline friends, let's say. And well, there were also other authors, but I think that in a way they have been more involved in my second book than in this one. I think because I just wrote this one um very on the go and without many expectations. But yeah, those would be two people that I will give a shout out to, even though the two of them are not in the only one. And for instance, for me, I'm looking forward to meeting more people in the indie community. And one thing that I've noticed is that as indies, we learn to do so many things. And
Yes.
the formatting, it is incredible. Like I compare it with the experience of other friends, and the amount of work we have to put in is incredible. And the skills that we acquire is really admirable, and it's so much work, but I find that it's fun. Like I don't know if it happens to you too when you get to choose everything, the cover, the format, the design. It's
Yes.
so fun, and I like it, but it's quite serious. It's I think it's more work than people imagine actually. So I'm quite in awe of all the indie authors that I know and the ones I don't know, because I know that everybody's working really hard.
Definitely. And now the final question, Alexandra. So this is a big reflective question among the many others in this interview. So from your experiences, crafting the story, agents who you've interacted with who have told you that your story has to fit this style, from going the independent route, getting your story out there, the people you've met, and also forgot to mention, friends and family who have been by your side from the beginning, and the new friends you've made, and everything you've learned thus far and will continue to learn about the industry as an independent author. For the young authors who are watching this video, or writers who have a story in their head that they want to share with the world, what is your word of wisdom to them?
Actually, I want to quote Oscar Wilde.
All right, go
He
ahead.
said it very well, and it's a very well known quote, but I apply it to my life. Be yourself, everyone else is taken. Listen, if you copy someone else, if you do what everybody tells you what to do, Yeah, you might sell a little bit and make a little bit of buzz, but actually, I believe that if you're interested in a legacy, for instance, it's more likely that you build a legacy if you shock everyone with a completely fresh thing that nobody saw coming than if you recycle the most famous works on the market in the last 10 years or now,
Right.
because it's really like it's really being like one a photocopy of someone else. And I've never read a success story of someone that has done that. It's always by being kind of original. That doesn't fully exist, but you know what I mean,
Hmm.
that you make an impact. I'm not about the impact, but if I think about it and if I remember what people have told me about the book, when people connect with it, it is because it is a little bit different. And I'm proud of that, and I hope that I can continue doing work like that, because it actually makes me prouder than if people would tell me, oh, it reminds me of this and that, then I'll be like, oh, okay. But
Hmm.
I don't think anything is original, but it's nicer when people tell you, oh, that was quite unexpected, oh, thank you. So I my advice is that, and I have a belief. You know how technology has changed our world and continues to change it. My
Right.
belief is that publishing is veering towards independent publishing a lot. If you think about it, if you think about Gen Z and all that, they are consuming a lot of stuff online. For instance, remember webtoons and all these platforms
Yes.
just publish whatever they want, and all the readers are there. Content creation via social media. What you see, if you look at that, is people taking the control and posting what they want without the gatekeepers and without the traditional okay and the traditional approval. And I think that as the self-publishing industry professionalizes and becomes more accepted by mainstream agents and mainstream readers, it is very possible that in the future most people will be consuming indie work, also because we indie authors perhaps experiment a little bit more because we are not.
Hmm.
So actually, I think, and is what I do, perhaps unconsciously, it's better to be different. It's better to do whatever you want because you're probably gonna make a mark easier that way, and by getting used to the discomfort of being a little bit seen a little bit different, and by doing things out of the box, you might connect with a lot of people that are searching actually that want something different, that are tired of this and that, and want to find you. So just be yourself, and if you can, be a little bit different, because I really believe that's now what the present is shaping up to and what the future will be.
Awesome. That is a perfect ending to this amazing author interview for the month of August. Thank you all so very much for joining us for our very first author interview for the month of August. A huge thank you to Alexandra for coming on the show, telling us all about her journey and her book. Alexandra, thank you so very, very much. Where can people find and engage with you on social media, and where can people go and buy your book?
Well, first of all, thanks to you for inviting me, of course. And my book, Auntie. It is available, well, if you live in the Netherlands, it's available at the Dutch bookstores that carry English titles. And if you are somewhere else, you can buy it via Amazon. I will, of course, make it available via other platforms, but I'm working on that. So for Amazon, my handle on most social media is just Alexandra Atman with an A. And I love to connect, so please feel free to add me and comment, etc. I love to interact, so I will usually respond you and chat with you because I love that.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. And as also, make sure again, readers, to pre-order your copy of Michael, Last Angel of Earth. It will
Ah,
be 1 month left until its official release, September 2nd.
yeah.
So make sure to pre-order yourself a copy. And if you want to join my ARC team, I will link it down below with the link to pre-order Michael. Thank you all so very much for joining us today. Thank you again to Alexandra for coming on the show, telling us all about her journey as an author, and we wish her the very, very best going forward with her journey. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview. And as always, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you a wonderful day, either morning, evening, afternoon, Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful day.